We rejoined Babur in 1505. It's been a year since Babur captured Kabul. However, the first year's expenses have outpaced the revenue generated in his new mountain kingdom. In an effort to refill the coffers, Babur sets out on what would be his first expedition into present-day Pakistan in January of 1505. He wrote in his memoirs, "My desire for Hindustan had been constant. It was the month of Shaban, the sun being in Aquarius, that we rode out of Kabul for Hindustan." He felt the lands were his by right via his ancestor Timur, who had controlled portions during the peak of the Timurid Empire. For 5 months, Babur would raid the towns and villages of the region. While there was plunder, there was also misinformation, which squandered the full potential of the raids. The route back to Kabul was also fraught with perils, but in May of 1505, Babur made it back to his kingdom. The seed for expansion of his empire into the region had now been firmly planted. However, his obsession for regaining his beloved homeland and Samarkand was still too strong. The year 1505 would also see Babur reunite with a distant relative of his, Sultan Hussein Mirza Bekara of Herat, against their common enemy, the Uzbek Shaybani, the very same Shaybani who had driven Babur from his homelands. However, before the campaign north could begin, the Sultan died, leaving his 2 sons as heirs, both of whom had no appetite for war. Instead, to appease, they invited Babur to Herat, which was then the cultural capital of the Eastern Muslim world. He spent 2 months there before leaving due to diminished resources. While the 2 brothers had no taste for war, their common enemy, the Uzbek Shaybani, most certainly did, and over the next few months, he would capture Herat, sending the 2 brothers fleeing from the city. As the sole Timurid left, Babur would take on the hollow title of Padshah of the Timurids, seeing as only Kabul, his own kingdom, was left in Timurid control. Babur would also face the familiar challenge of rebellion, this time in Kabul, and he was forced under pressure by some of his own generals who had joined the rebellion to leave the city. However, he would soon return and regain their and the other rebels' allegiance. Kandahar, which lay southwest of Kabul, had been semi-autonomous for the past decade since the Arghans had lost control of it. Babur annexed the city in 1508, adding it to his Kabul kingdom. We rejoin Ismail in 1510. He has conquered the whole of present-day Iran, southern Dagestan, Mesopotamia, Armenia, Khorasan, and eastern Anatolia, as well as the aforementioned Georgian kingdoms of Kartli and Kakheti. Badi al-Zaman, one of Hussein Baikara's sons, who had fled Herat when it was captured by Muhammad Shaybani, makes an appeal for Ismail to grant him asylum and urges him to launch a campaign eastward to free the city. However, as Ismail had done numerous times before, he would grant the request, but would ultimately keep the holdings for his empire. With this, the forces of fate, destiny, and chance have pushed Shah Ismail on a collision course with Babur's enemy Muhammad Shaybani. Shah Ismail steers his Qizilbash army up into the former Timurid lands of Khorasan, capturing Herat and then moving on towards Merv in the north. Muhammad Shaybani's confidence, given his larger army of 28,000 to Shah Ismail's 17,000, is apparent. However, being outnumbered in battles was something Ismail had dealt with numerous times successfully, and Merv would prove to be no different. The speed of Ismail's Qizilbash surprised Shaybani, who then retreats to the Merv castle to wait for reinforcements from other Uzbek tribes. Ismail, ever the tactician, feigns a retreat from Merv, which Shaybani is unable to resist given those superior numbers. Shah Ismail has a portion of his Qizilbash lie in ambush just at the point where Shaybani's troops would receive no benefit from the castle. Thousands of Uzbeks are killed and Muhammad Shaybani flees the battle. However, he's captured and promptly executed, with his remains sent throughout areas of the empire in display. Ismail, eager to make a statement to other Uzbeks, has Shaybani's skull coated in gold and various jewels to serve as a drinking goblet. Shah Ismail's Safavid Empire now extended in the east to Babur's kingdom of Kabul and Kandahar. Babur and Ismail, while previously aware of each other's existence, now share a common political border. Ismail's Safavid Empire spanning the entire western region of Babur's kingdom. The news of Ismail's defeat of Babur's enemy Muhammad Shaybani reaches Kabul in December of 1510. Fellow countryman Mirza Khan sends the news and indicates to Babur that thousands of Mughals had left Merv for Kunduz to the north of Kabul. They had been servants of Babur's uncle Mahmud and Ahmad. Mirza invites Babur to join them and regain his homeland. On hearing this news, Babur heads north through the only winter route through Abdara and reaches Kunduz a month later in January. The vying groups are unable to reach consensus on Babur's role and part ways. While in Kunduz, Babur is reunited with his sister Khan Zahra, who was brought to him by Shah Ismail's troops. Babur sends Mirza Khan to Ismail with thanks and gifts and with a request for military assistance. Mirza is well received by Ismail, and the request for military assistance is granted, but with multiple concessions, chief among them, overlordship of Babur's lands by Ismail and the Safavids. Babur agrees to these conditions and forms a partnership with Shah Ismail. With Babur's agreement secured, Shah Ismail sends Najmi Sani, his finance minister, with the objective of helping secure Babur's homeland. In 1512, he leaves Kabul to the care of his brother Nasir Mirza and meets up with Najmi Sani's troops, forming a combined army estimated at 60,000 troops. They approached Karshi, which Babur wanted to leave behind as per previous forays into the region, but Najmi Sani refuses, as he believes it was the new Uzbek leader Sultan Ubaidullah's lair. The residents of the city, young and old, are massacred. Among them, one of the most eminent poets, Maulana Binai, who had happened to be passing through the city when the massacre began. Babur is disgusted, but feels compelled to maintain the alliance. Babur takes a portion of the troops and heads in the direction of Bukhara and Samarkand. His aides had scouted both and said of Bukhara that it was then empty of troops and full of fools. They therefore urged a direct move on both. Babur was able to take Bukhara essentially unopposed, and from there he continued on to Samarkand, and like Bukhara, was able to enter Samarkand unopposed. It was said that the town was decorated to welcome him with much acclaim from its people. This would mark the closest Babur would get to his desire to reoccupy the lands of his forefathers in the Fergana Valley. Word then got to Babur months later from Najmi Sani that the Uzbeks had assembled under Ubaidullah Sultan and fortified themselves within Gazdawan, a small town northeast of Bukhara. Babur leaves to meet Najmi Sani to combine their troops. Babur and Najm's combined troops then meet the Uzbeks at Gazdawan for what would be the decisive battle. The Uzbeks firmly entrenched themselves in the town, with archers taking up positions in every corner of the city to pour arrows down upon the Kizilbash. When their military chief, Biram Khan, is injured, chaos and disorder ensues. Still disgusted at Najm's previous massacre, many refuse to fight, and within an hour, the combined army is routed by the Uzbeks. Babur flees back to Hisar and finally resigns all hope of ever recovering his beloved homeland in the Fergana Valley. Najmi Sani is captured and promptly executed. It was after this battle and his return back to Kabul in 1514 that would see Babur focus his attention towards Hindustan in an effort to expand his lands away from the ever-encroaching Uzbeks. In the third and final part of the series, we will witness the defeat that tore away the aura of Shah Ismail's invulnerability, as well as the rise of Babur's Mughal Empire.